Greetings, everyone, and welcome to We Are ACEDS, streaming live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Mike Quartararo. I am the president of ACEDS. Today, we are going to be joined momentarily by Doug Austin. Doug is an industry veteran, a technologist, author of the prolific blog eDiscovery Today, and somehow no one is really quite sure how he does it, but Doug posts 3, sometimes 4 times a day, sometimes on weekends. If you do any writing at all, you know how hard that is. Doug is also a great friend of ACEDS, and we wanted to have him on to talk a little bit about his recent report on the state of the industry. Of course, we're talking about the eDiscovery industry. Doug, thanks for making time to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Looking forward to getting into the state of the industry.
As we like to say, let's dance, right?
Right. Yes, indeed.
First, I want to talk a little bit about the sort of origin of the report and the demographics to give folks, I think, a sense of where the report came from, how far it reaches throughout the industry. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the report has been around for 5 years, just released the 5th year edition of the report. Basically, shortly after I started the blog in 2020, I thought it would be great to do something where we could get a sense of the state of the industry. And I really thought to do something different, I would make it kind of a combination report where part of it would be survey on various topics in the industry. And then the other part would be thought leader observations on those same topics. So we've been doing it for 5 years. It's sponsored by EDRM. Every year, the survey, response group of the survey has grown. We started with 183 in our first year. We're up to 551 respondents to the survey this year, which is meeting our goal of continuing to broaden the information from the industry in terms of the trends. And then this year we had 63 thought leaders contributing observations on those same trends. So every year we're looking to really try to pinpoint some of the key trends people are interested in and provide results that hopefully are informative and can help people decide how they want to pursue things from an eDiscovery standpoint.
And I've been blessed to be part of those, quote unquote, air quotes, thought leaders. I love just offering my thoughts on the current state of the world, at least the eDiscovery world anyway. All right, let's talk a little bit about the report. First, how do folks get to the report if they'd like to?
So it's basically a free report. It's only available for subscribers to eDiscovery Today, which is also free. So if you go to eDiscoverytoday.com, all one word, no dashes, and basically in the top right there, you provide your email address and subscribe. You'll not only get this report, but any other reports we produce for free, and of course, the delivery of the daily blog.
And the 3 times a day, it's great content.
So recommended sometimes.
Recommended to anybody. And I was going to ask you, like, how do you find the time? And you and I have talked about this, but how do you find the time, the discipline, the gumption, frankly, to post on your blog as often as you do?
Well, it's just really you kind of get used to it, and there's certain there's always a kind of a list of things to cover. Amazingly enough, there's more things to cover than I can get to, which is why last year I started a kitchen sink with 10 stories I couldn't get to, and just to provide that at the end of the week. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many different trends. Case law. There's all sorts of things to cover, and of course, eDiscovery has so many things related to it: AI, data privacy, cyber, InfoGov. So stories that are related to all of that are fair game, and I think of interest to the readers.
eDiscovery adjacent, we like to say.
eDiscovery adjacent, good way of putting it. Yes.
And I'm a frequent. People will frequently hear me say, "Hey, did you see Doug's kitchen sink today?" That's on Fridays. Every once in a while, we get a mention in there, and I appreciate that. All right, let's talk about the report a little bit. There's tons of information in here. Encourage everybody to subscribe to get access to the report. But let's talk about barriers to adoption for large language models and generative AI technologies. Doug, why do you think this is an issue today? Is the technology not ready? Are people not ready? What's going on here?
So a couple of things. Certainly, I think people are very gung-ho about the potential of Gen AI. Basically, more than a quarter expected Gen AI to have a transformative effect this year, and over 4 and 5 expect it to at least create new workflows this year from an eDiscovery standpoint. But when we ask another question, which was what percentage of cases are you using it on, only about 12% said they use it in all or most of their cases. 64% said they use it in very few or none of their cases. I think there's a couple aspects to that. One is, I think last year was a bit of a mulligan year because honestly, a lot of the technologies were they were well into beta for a good portion of the year before they were actually released. So obviously they're not using it on live cases if it's in a beta, generally. So I think that was one of the things that it'll be interesting to see this year how these numbers change. But I also think people, like, this was one of the questions we asked specifically from a thought leader standpoint, is barriers to to adoption. And people brought up cost, and of course, like any new technology, cost typically starts high and comes down as it becomes more efficient. The trust in the technology, people are concerned about hallucinations and inaccuracies and things of that nature. Also concerned about defensibility or the need to defend the use of generative AI, like they have had to do so with TAR. One of the things I think will be a differentiator is that there are so many different use cases you can use Gen AI for that. Even if you're worried about using it for document review because of defensibility, you can use it for document summarizations and ECA and translations and image identification and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the things that will differ it from, like the adoption cycle of TAR in terms of how it becomes used. But definitely, I think, there are some barriers, and it'll be interesting to see just how much those barriers slow things down. Of course, one obvious last barrier is resistance to change. People are reluctant to change. People are concerned about changing, even things like their billing models, which is significant, or even concerned about, jobs. So all of those, it'll be interesting to see how they'll impact the speed of adoption.
Yeah, I made a post, just a comment on a post last night, frankly, that we sometimes forget that a lot of people made a lot of money on document review, and that's hard to let go of. All right,
Absolutely.
Perfect segue, by the way, to whether or not respondents to the report, and your take on it as well. I have a take. Whether or not Gen AI technologies are going to replace what we've come to know now, 15 years out, as technology assisted review, predictive coding. Is this a real thing? Is this going to just replace it?
Well, so I'll talk numbers first, and then I'll talk thoughts.
Let's do that.
Because I, this was one of the key ones. We've asked this question all 5 years in the survey: is what percentage of cases do you use TAR on? This year, over 30%, 30.8% said they use predictive coding technologies in all or most of their cases. And 24.9% said they use it in very few or none of their cases. And so you're like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah,
well,
what does that mean?
Right. Well, if you look at over the 5 years, the all or most group is almost the largest it's ever been. The very first year was 31.1%. This year, 30.8%. So just a smidge off. But the very few none group is the lowest it's ever been. So that means that that basically 3/4 of the people are using TAR more than very few of their cases. Almost half the people are using it half the time. These last 2 years are the first 2 years where the all or most groups were higher than the very few or none groups. So far, Gen AI isn't impacting TAR negatively at all. If anything, it's maybe even giving it a boost. Now, it'll be interesting to see, because over the long term, we don't know. We don't know what will happen. And that's one of the questions I asked thought leaders. And some said, oh, yeah, it's going to replace it. It's going to replace it soon. Others said, no, it's not going to replace it, or it may impact it, but there will still be use cases for tar that will still remain. So I think right now it's certainly going strong. And Judge Peck said, hey, tar hasn't come close to replacing keywords, and legal people are slow to adopt things. So if anything, maybe AI will increase the use of tar. And so far, he's probably right.
Yeah, I think if there's one constant throughout, it's the slow pace at which the legal industry adopts new technology. And so my take on it was it complements, not replaces, right? And I think
Well, and
that's
that's what several people have said,
yeah.
is that there are complementary aspects to it, and I definitely see that. I certainly think that there are going to be aspects of it. Certainly, I think some of the methodologies. I think some people think tar methodologies go a bit too far sometimes, but I think generative AI needs some level of methodologies for validation of the results, and I think that's one of the things that we need to see, in whatever process you use, is something to be able to validate and defend the results.
All right, so let's talk use cases. You've got some information on use cases, but I also want to get your take on it. When it comes to Gen AI, um, how are we truly incorporating it into the eDiscovery process from InfoGov through, let's just draw the line at trial prep, right? Um, like what's really happening here? I see a lot in doc review. Does Gen AI impact collections? Your take. What does the report say, and what's your take?
So for the first time this year, I asked a question about use cases for Gen AI and what people are using Gen AI and LLM technologies on, and I provided like maybe about 10 answers, and gave the ability to provide some other comments and so forth. And obviously, doc review is number one. 62.3% of respondents said they use it for doc review. Now, of course, they're not always using it on cases just yet, but certainly I think they're working on it and looking at incorporating that into their workflows. Document summarization was next. But other things, privilege and PII identification is a big use case. Almost half the people said they use it for that. People are using it for case strategy and ECA. And of course, one of the great things about generative AI is the ability, once you've loaded some documents in, your collections in, to be able to ask questions and start to, build some strategy that you didn't have the ability to do from before. You can even load a complaint in and say, find me documents that tie into this, and what have you. So it's pretty amazing some of the things you can do. Translation was another one. Timelines of key events, and depot prep and summaries. All of those had 30% or more of respondents saying they use Gen AI for those use cases. And I think we're just kind of scratching the surface on what other use cases it could be used for. I could see, obviously, it's going to have InfoGov ramifications. I could see it being used in preservation and collection. I could see it being used for trial prep activities and what have you. So I think it's really going to have not just huge eDiscovery implications, but huge litigation implications, as well as huge implications to all the other use cases we use eDiscovery for, like investigations and incident response and what have you. So it's going to have a profound effect ultimately.
Do you see a day? I'm just going to throw a scenario at you where, let's just say, a large corporation has presumably a closed model within their organization, and they receive notice of a legal action, and some technologist or legal person simply goes in and says, "Hey, we've been sued for this. This is the prompt, right? I need all the emails between this date, and that date that discuss whatever topic, right?" And that's boom, Gen AI.
I
Yeah.
I could very easily see a scenario like that when you think of some of the huge, the huge data sets that Gen AI has been trained on, and how you can give it a prompt and it can immediately respond with information. Obviously, you've got to make sure that information is sourced, and that's one of the things that I think we're starting to see, improvements on. But absolutely, I could see a day where we get to that, where you just kind of pull together a list of the things that relate to, the potential litigation, and start going through it and figuring out your strategy, and decide whether you want to, litigate or settle or what have you.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, I want to shift gears a minute because in our sort of preparation for this, you expressed some interest in talking about the state of mobile device discovery. What's interesting here? What does the report tell us, and what's your take?
Well, so a couple of things. This is a question we've asked the last 4 years. The first year we asked a combined mobile collaboration app question, which wasn't really good for analysis, so rookie mistake. But this year, the last 4 years we've asked percentage of cases involving mobile devices, and 37.5% said they have it in all or most of their cases. 19.7 said they have it in few or none of their cases. So it's about a 2-to-1 ratio, and it's pretty good. But the numbers are actually a little down from last year, basically about 2.5 off the high on the all or most groups, and about a little less than a percentage higher on the very few or none groups, which is worse. And so, of course, the question is, what does that mean? Well, it could simply mean that we have a larger sample size. Last year was 444 respondents. This one's 551. So I'm not sure the anomalies that much to be concerned about. But one of the things that's key about the report is we break out different response groups. So this year we broke out service providers, law firms, consultancies, corporations, and for the first time, government agencies. So we get a chance to kind of dive into the numbers a little bit. And one of the things that's been clearly evident when it comes to mobile device numbers the past few years is that corporates are bringing the overall numbers down. Corporates basically were only 20% using it in all or most of their cases, 46% using it in very few or none of their cases, which to me indicates that's an area they're still kind of avoiding, maybe because it's BYOD devices not in their possession, custody, control, what have you. But that's definitely a group that's kind of keeping the mobile numbers from going down. Personal experience, I'm covering more cases of eDiscovery case law rulings about mobile device discovery than ever before. So I definitely think it's still on the rise, despite kind of a little bit of a pullback this year.
I'm wondering, Doug, if it's a strategic decision being made, whether it's for, hey, don't connect your mobile device to your corporate system or your law firm system, whatever, right? Or if there's like, you know what, in the state of wellness we're in today, I'm turning off my phone at 6 p.m. every night. I'm wondering if it's a strategic decision that's bringing those numbers down a little bit.
Could be. It's also, I think we've had a couple of cases. We had the in Ray Pork, the Hormel case a couple of years ago, where the court ruled that the employee devices weren't in the possession, custody, control of the corporation. But the plaintiffs were smart, and they also went after the custodians separately, as through third party subpoenas, and still managed to get that data. I think we're going to see more of that, and I think that's where I think cases like that are going to enable corporates even more to throw up their hands and go, "It's not our deal. It's not our data. What they have on their phones is theirs. You can go through it, go at it through them."
Yeah. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is eDiscovery challenges that we are not talking about. And I want to put this graphic up on the screen. Let me just share this because I think it's fascinating that all these years in, we are, still sort of struggling with what bluntly is a lack of eDiscovery competence. In the survey, you ask what do you think is the eDiscovery challenge that not enough people in the industry are talking about? And number one, I think again this year, I'll let you expound on that, but again this year, number one is lack of eDiscovery competence in the legal profession. What is going on here, Doug? eDiscovery's been around for I mean, if you go back, but I'd say more prominent for over 20 years, 25 maybe. Uh, why is this still a challenge?
Well, first off, I'll mention I've asked this question all 5 years as well. This year, I changed it up a bit. Lack of eDiscovery competence was the top choice all first 4 years. This year, I thought, well, we need to really kind of work in some things that people are saying are challenges, like rising costs of eDiscovery and lack of access to justice, and lack of cooperation between parties, and eDiscovery, lack of eDiscovery by design, and increased use of eDiscovery for other use cases and things like that. So I changed up the question this year in terms of options, but left the lack of eDiscovery competence option in there. And once again, it's the top choice. So I think, one of the things I think there's 1.3 million attorneys just in the US. So there's a lot of people to educate. And I certainly think that some of the people who responded to the question, some of the thought leaders, talk about some of the challenges. Tom O'Connor, has routinely talked about lack of education of eDiscovery in the law schools. So people are coming out not knowing about eDiscovery and then having to learn on the fly. So I think that's ACEDS and eDiscovery Today and organizations like us are doing what we can to help educate the industry, but it's a huge industry. So it's kind of one of those cases where the challenge still exists, and certainly people in the eDiscovery bubble, I think, especially think of there being still a bit of a problem outside of the bubble.
Yeah, and I'll just share as an educational organization, we're doing everything we can. I'm amazed that it still is. What else jumps out at you that folks, not enough people are talking about from this graph?
Well, so I almost yanked because I had a use case question the past 2 years. I almost yanked it this year, and then I still hear people kind of equating litigation and eDiscovery almost like and they're really different because litigation is a use case for eDiscovery, and obviously eDiscovery began because of litigation, but there's so many other things it can be used for. So it was interesting that I think that was the next highest choice up on the list in terms of people saying we're not talking enough about how eDiscovery is for other use cases. The other thing that's notable, and I think we're seeing this with the EDRM 2.0 project and what have you, one of the drivers of that is about the move to the left of the EDRM model and in-place indexing and stuff like that. I think that's one that I think we still feel probably isn't getting enough discussion, and I definitely expect that's going to be important. So yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of challenges. It will be interesting to continue to ask this question and see if maybe one day the lack of eDiscovery competence numbers goes down. It's about a point and a half lower than it was last year, so at least that's a little bit of progress.
We'll take it, even marginal gains. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about the report. We're almost out of time, but before we go, is there anything new, interesting coming up for you for eDiscovery Today? I assume you're coming up for Legal Week. Any other conferences?
Be at the Masters Conference next week, while also doing an ACEDS webinar next week, basically talking about the unique challenges for hyperlink files. And obviously the hyperlink files, modern attachments issues really captivated the industry. And one of the things we're going to be doing with this webinar next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern is we're really going to focus on the technical stuff, the technical challenges, potential solutions. We're going to have resources with links to like the case law, and we may, tangentially mention it, but we're really going to focus on the technical stuff. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking to do next Wednesday. And it's going to be fun. I think we're going to have a fun, interesting discussion about the issues. And I did a blog post yesterday talking about what does contemporaneous version really mean? Because I think that's not what we don't even completely agree on that. So I think it's going to be interesting to talk about some of the where we stand and some of the technical challenges.
Appreciate that. And for anyone who's interested, we posted the link to register for the webinar in the chat, so please sign up for that. Doug, this has been great. Thanks so much for making time for us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I haven't had a chance to check any of the comments, but if anybody had any questions, I'll certainly hop onto LinkedIn afterwards and feel free to respond to those.
Awesome.
And thanks for having me, Mike and ACEDS.
Happy to have you. Thanks for doing this. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you are interested in our short form interviews like this one, you can find We Are ACEDS live streams, obviously, in your LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook feeds, or check the ACEDS YouTube channel where you can watch previous interviews. As always, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and be kind to one another.
Hi, everybody.